It's been a long time since I've had my good friend Dennis Richardson in the studio, Representative Dennis Richardson from Central Point, and we have served together at the ORP, Oregon Republican Party, and we have been to a lot of committee meetings together. We've been to a lot of Central Committee meetings together. Then he went and got elected, and I didn't. And he's doing a wonderful job. He is the, we like to call you, in fact, here's what we say, Dennis, that Paul Ryan is the Dennis Richardson for the United States when it comes to budgeting.
Well, I consider that a tremendous,
I don't know of anybody that doesn't understand the budgeting process in the state of Oregon who's been a hawk on this issue like you have. And you have really done a wonderful job. And we'll get into some of those things here in just a moment. But we are coming up, we're about 49 days out. How serious is this election, from your opinion, for the United States?
I think it's absolutely crucial. We're at a crossroads financially, economically, where it may be too late, but hopefully it's not. And the hope that we have for meaningful change comes from Paul Ryan and from Mitt Romney.
Right.
I mean, they are willing to actually, in a campaign, discuss the problems that we have with Social Security. And with the facts that we are borrowing almost 40 cents for every dollar we spend.
That's unbelievable.
I mean, think of your own home. How would that work? How long can you borrow 40 cents of every dollar that you have and maintain your standard of living? I mean, it is a false situation that we're in. In fact, I was doing some work on it myself just a few weeks ago, and I found that 88 cents of every tax dollar that we bring into the federal government is being spent currently on either Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, or the interest on the debt. That only leaves 12 cents or 12% of tax money for other things, and then almost 40% is borrowed money.
Those are numbers that are mind-boggling, and of course we ask ourselves, how do we get into this mess? And there's a lot of blame going around, but now it's down to where we just have to make some hard decisions and make some changes. All right, you just got back from China.
Right.
And tell us about that.
2.5 weeks. This was my 10th delegation to China, and over the past decade, we do about once a year, we have built relationships that have become very meaningful to the Chinese. I mean, the Asians, like all of us, respect their friends and show honor and give attention to those who do the same with them. And so we've done little things like say that, we think that we're the gateway for the Chinese to America, and that we would like to promote our students having the opportunity to learn Chinese if they want. So we actually passed a law which said to our Department of Education, if you have the opportunity to allow the instruction of Chinese, then you ought to do that. It's nothing mandatory. Well, that was the only law in all the 50 states that actually recognized the importance of teaching Chinese. And so in China, in Beijing, we're not just talking about a small part, the central government is very much aware of what we're doing in Oregon, and so when we go over there with our delegations, it opens up doors.
Wow.
So we took 2 businesses with us, an architectural firm up from Portland, as well as a firm that helps lessen erosion. They have products that help agricultural use to stop erosion. And China has some environmental issues, So we go over there, and we have an opportunity to have these 2 companies present what they can do in front of the decision makers for an entire island. It's called Pingtan Island. Basically, this is the closest landmass that China has to Taiwan.
Wow.
And they're trying to encourage the Taiwanese to, come back in the fold. And so what they've done is they've established a high-speed ferry connection between Pingtan and Taiwan, as well as commit the equivalent of $45 billion to developing this island. And they want it to be done in a sustainable way. So we went over and said, Oregon's good at sustainability, and we've got firms that understand this. And so before we're done, the architectural firm was told that they will have 2 projects.
Really?
We're not talking about buildings, we're talking about projects that are part of this whole island. And the other firm dealing with, it's called Perma Matrix, and dealing with erosion, they were told, come and present to us what you're doing, because we would like you to also have part of the projects that we offer. And so these are companies that have jobs. I mean, these are businesses in Oregon that, when they expand, hire people, and that is how you increase the number of jobs. It's by expanding businesses, and you do that by going to places that have money that want to buy what you have to offer. And like it or not, we buy at Walmart, we send our dollars to China. Why shouldn't we get those dollars back? If they're going to buy American, let's have them buy Oregon.
There you go. Good stuff. All right, so that was your 10th one, and that connection and those open doors continue to be made. All right, let's come back a little bit closer to home. There's a lot going on. We got some, first of all, do you think on the political side, the Republicans will take control of the House?
I
know you hope so.
I'm optimistic.
Okay.
I really am.
Okay.
We have some races up north that we have candidates that are working hard. They're knocking doors. They're meeting people. They stand for what's right. They're willing to speak out for good principles. And what happens, even in districts where you have more Democrats than Republicans, if they meet somebody, it's a way with all of us. I mean, if somebody comes to our door and we go down the list, and then they'll say, Democrat, yeah, Democrat. Oh, that's that nice young woman that came to my door. Click, because they know them. And then they'll go down the party line. And so we believe that we will take the majority, that I will then be the sole co-chair from the House of Ways and Means, and we'll have the ability to get more done instead of just blocking bad legislation.
All right, that's where I thought. If the Republicans do take control, you become chairman of the, well, co-chairman of the Ways and Means. But you guys were in a 50-50 split. How did that work for you?
It actually worked out very well. We were, in a very bad situation financially, and what happens in politics is whoever has the majority has the power, but it means those in the minority spend their time trying to undercut the majority. And so if you have 31 to 29, it's very difficult because you have to deliver 31 votes to get anything done on controversial bills. The way it was with a 30-30 split is Peter Buckley and I, representing our caucuses, each had to come up with at least 16 votes for key budgets. And so several times I had to remind him, I said, Peter, we need to compromise. You need to understand we're at the table, and you don't have to deliver 31 votes. You have to deliver a majority from your caucus, and I do the same, and so let's focus on what's best for Oregon and not on what you're going to have to do to satisfy the far left. So anyway, it worked out very well.
You had co-speakers?
We had co-speakers, Bruce Hanna and Arnie Roblin, both fine men, and they were committed to working together to get, to move things ahead. It could have been nothing get done, but instead they decided to cooperate on those things that they could and negotiate on the things that were difficult, and those things that they know would not make it all the way through the building. There's no sense in trying to expend all your energy on bills that are going to get killed in the Senate or not signed by the governor. So it actually showed that the system can work. And we have national organizations that are coming to Oregon and filming interviews. I just was interviewed last week in Salem because it works so well in Oregon, and so they want to use it as a model for other states.
Well, there you go. Then the governor, he returns for his third term, and he was pretty much AOL the last go-around. This one, I get the feeling he was a little bit more engaging. Yes,
he learned from the past. Right after he won the election, I met with him and said, so John, how do you want this to work? Are you looking back, you've got experience, you've been there for 8 years and you saw what happened. Would you like to see this be better? And he said, he certainly would. And I said, then you need to have Republicans at the table at the beginning. Do not exclude the minority merely because they're the minority. Have us at the table, have us working with you, and we can work toward a system that will look for long term. Because what we need to be doing, the governor is the chief executive, and he needs to be organized and working with people that have vision to say, what is the purpose of state government? And then you develop the programs and fund the programs to accomplish the purposes, and then you come back afterward and say, did these programs effectively help work toward the goal? But in the past, it's been, what programs do we have? How much money did we give them last time? How much do they want this time? And so, and then just kind of negotiating. And this is this little loop about perpetuating programs instead of saying, are these programs doing us any good?
if the Republicans get the House, and I don't know how the Senate looks from last I looked, it's a maybe.
It's a maybe.
And so if the Republicans got control of the legislature, but you don't have the governorship, what do you think the governor does? Is he take off and fly away and not do anything, or what happens?
Well, I'm afraid he's in campaign mode again, because 2 years from now he's up for re-election. I wish that he had made the commitment that he wasn't going to be going for re-election, because then he'd be free to make those changes that really would be for the benefit of the state, instead of saying, what am I going to have to do to keep my base so that I can get re-elected? Now, hopefully, if we take the House and the Senate, it'll be just a situation of negotiations.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we have to sit down. The leadership of the House, the Senate, and the governor need to sit down and say, all right, what things are off the table? What things do we really want to see happen, so that we're working the entire session toward common interest goals?
Are we healthy financially?
Oh, no, absolutely not. We still have expenditures that are higher than our revenue. As you recall, in this negotiation we had for the current budget, I had been relentless in requiring that we have an ending balance. And I negotiated my way down to $480 million, which was more than twice what it's ever been, at least in my lifetime. And so by having that ending balance, realize we budget toward a forecast, not toward real money. And so the forecast had continually been erroneous. It had been wrong.
It's never been right.
It's always overly optimistic.
Right.
And so by having that cushion, in other words, we budgeted to a forecast that was $480 million less than what the forecast was at that time. Well, the forecasts have gone down since then. And so we had enough of a cushion that we didn't have to go back to the programs and say, sorry, go lay off people.
Boy, did you take the heat for that, huh?
It really did. But it's funny. Nobody's complaining now. They're all saying, well, we agreed to this.
You were a prophet, and nobody wanted to recognize it. Representative Dennis Richardson is with us today, and he is, we call Paul Ryan the Dennis Richardson of the U.S. budget in the House, and Dennis is the hawk in the House here in the state of Oregon, doing a great job in watching that. Took a lot of heat for trying to retain some money in the kitty. And you know, I was reading some of the headlines, I thought, oh man, been there, done that. I can't imagine, but you really got raked over the coals by some liberal groups and media, but you ended up being absolutely correct.
It's really funny, the unions, the public sector unions got together and funded thousands of dollars of TV commercials back in 2011 when we were working on the budget. And they went all over the state and even southern Washington, and they were saying, call Representative Richardson and tell him that he should not hold $440 million for his own political purposes, that we need that money spent now. And my political purposes were just the reserves, and they were agreed to by the two Democrats, but they forgot to mention that.
But you actually broke some ice there, and created a new mindset, and you proved to be right. Do you think this thing's got traction for the future?
I really do, especially if I'm still at the table. November will determine that. I mean, if we do not win the majority in the House, then in all likelihood, the Democrats will defang me, because I caused them some grief so that they can go forward with their own agenda. That would be bad for Oregon. Hopefully we'll stay at least the 30-30 split, or that we'll become the majority, because my goal will be to keep Peter Buckley involved in the process, because I've learned over time it's a mistake for the majority party to essentially isolate the minority party. They have no stake in the outcome if they're not involved in the decision making. And so we need to learn from what we've done. On the bigger picture, Jason kind of had to laugh a little bit too. His K through 12 thinking got through even before the 81 days. And that got funded early in the session, and that shows that can be done, and that took the biggest hot potato off the table, didn't it? It did, and it was one of the things that I was fighting for, and it was funny, if you had been in those negotiations, the first few weeks, not much got done, because I said, well, we have to agree before things go forward, and you want to talk about budgets, and I'm not willing to even look at a budget until we know how much we're going to have to spend. So we finally made an agreement on that, and I said, well, we still can't listen to budgets until we know how much we're going to have in reserves, so that we really will know how much we're going to budget to, or how much we're going to spend. And then finally we agreed on that, and then it was, okay, let's go to the budget that makes the most sense, because we're in hard times. Instead of throwing what's left at education, let's fund education first. And we all agreed to that, and so it moved through it. And we also budgeted based on what we had spent the last 2 years, not on what they wanted to spend the next 2 years. You know, see what I'm saying? It used to be current service level. And what we did is say, okay, where are we at? And that's the starting point. So that was a major change. And so I hope that those changes will continue.
Dennis, what are we going to do to spark some new business in the state of Oregon? What are we going to do to attract some companies to come here?
Well, it's very difficult under the current system of taxation that we have and regulation. I mean, I've said, and I was asked on another forum whether or not I meant it, I said it's easier to start a business in communist China than it is in Oregon. And that's the truth. I mean, it's a sad situation when you have to go through so many permitting processes and impact statements and all of these things before you can build a building to bring a business to Oregon and hire Oregon workers. But it takes, you know, sometimes years to get those approvals in Oregon. In China, ultimately it will become like that because they will regulate like we do, but it's still wide open for the time being.
Well, you know, what's also interesting is that people like living here. They want to do business here. I know that there's a ballot measure now to see whether or not this inheritance tax thing's going to be broken. How does that feel to you? I mean, I know it's the right piece of legislation. You think it has a chance? You think the average citizen out there understands the impact of that one?
I don't know, because I don't have a feel for what's going on statewide. I know that I certainly support the elimination of taxing again, you know, an estate after somebody dies. And you tax them throughout their life. What you're doing is
$1 million now. I mean, it's $1 million buffer now, right, in the state of Oregon. I know it's $5 million in the feds. It's $1 million in the state of Oregon, which is nothing when you're trying to pass the family farm on.
Oh, that's exactly right. And it sends a message to people that are successful. I mean, poor people do not give jobs or create jobs.
Right.
It's wealthy people that have the money to invest and the vision and the experience, the talent, you know, to expand businesses which create jobs. So if you're looking to come to the West Coast, you say, okay, I could go to Oregon where you have a death tax and where the primary source of revenue is from the income tax, and it has one of the highest taxing rates for long-term capital gains and personal and corporate income tax as any state. Or I can go to Nevada or Washington where there's no income tax, or Utah. And so it's hard for us to compete until we recognize that it's not a utopia where the liberals can say we just need to tax the rich more, but we need to create an environment that attracts business so that their jobs will expand.
Well, I think getting rid of that inheritance tax will be huge. I mean, can you imagine the amount of money that will transfer once that happens?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, just in families alone. All right, your sidekick, Peter Buckley, is for the marijuana law, and you are vehemently against it, and that was in the paper this morning. And now I want to clarify things to our viewers and listeners. You saw the picture of Peter Buckley saying, yeah, I'm for it, with Dennis standing behind him. That does not mean Dennis was standing there supporting that statement.
That picture had nothing to do with marijuana. It was just a file photo that they had that had both of us in it.
Hidden light opinion making. I get it. So I wanted to give you a chance to defend yourself on that.
Well, I got called yesterday by Damian Mann from the Tribune. He said he'd been talking with Buckley on Measure 80, and I said, well, Peter has consistently said he's in favor of legalizing marijuana. I said, my view is marijuana is a gateway drug. I mean, people that I've known, and from high school on, they didn't say, I think I'm going to go into more difficult drugs doing nothing. They kind of work their way to it. But I also said the current laws we have in Oregon cannot be continued. We have now allowed an in-run around legalization or illegalization of marijuana through the medical marijuana card.
And they're advertising it on radio.
For $100, anybody can legally smoke marijuana in Oregon. And so it's not regulated, it's not taxed, it opens up a lot of crime. These guys that are growing all over our valley have pit bulls and signs and guns, and I mean, they're protecting their crop. And so there's this whole culture that is dangerous for our society. And so I think Measure 80 is a good discussion for us to have, and we need to make sure that we either legalize it and then face it, just face this issue, or change the law that we have on medical marijuana and restrict it to those people that were intended to have it, meaning, you know, the terminally ill, those that are suffering from those diseases that have been shown to be effective, you know, to deal with, to lessen the pain through marijuana, but not have it be anybody who ever had a history of pain in the past, which is what we have currently.
So if 80 passes, I guess the argument goes away, but if 80 doesn't pass, then it brings back into the whole medical marijuana discussion.
That does, and
for reevaluation.
It's very difficult to deal with this because there's a lot of money in marijuana, and a lot of the growers are starting to get together and become a force for political power. That's very dangerous for us.
All right, got a few minutes left. I want to talk about education and how you view it in the state. And I don't know if a school district isn't struggling. We got the PERS issues. Can you give me a snapshot of this problem?
Right. I'm doing research for a newsletter on the status of education in Oregon now. The emphasis has been on teachers and unions and strikes. Well, we don't have education so that teachers have a job. We have education because we should be focused on the quality of learning and opportunity for training of our students. And the best teachers are needed to give the best education. And bad teachers should find another job. But right now, we are so consumed or caught up by the control of the teachers' unions over the process that we, on a global basis, continue to become less and less significant. I mean, the three public schools, public education sources for that are top of the globe in reading, science, and math are all Shanghai. The top 5 include Shanghai, Hong Kong, Finland, Singapore, and we're like 33rd in one class, 23 or 27 in the other class. I mean,
it's way down.
We're behind Bulgaria and Hungary. We've got to change the way that we present education to give a global education for our kids.
You saw the Eagle Point thing. We sat there and watched this, and I'm going, you know, when you have public unions that can strike the very people that pay the bill, I'm just kind of going, what in the world have we done to ourselves?
Oh, the public unions are a block to change for Oregon because they have such power. I mean, they have the right to collect their dues from the salaries of the workers and then use them to find and promote candidates who are friendly to their causes, get them elected. It's an incestuous situation in the Capitol. And as long as we have that, we are in jeopardy of remaining just bouncing along on the bottom part of the national averages.
Can PERS, I know we've made some changes. Is it controllable or getting under control?
No. The unfunded actuarial liability has been recalculated at $16 billion. So for what that means, just divide, you know, we got 3.8 million people in our state, and divide that into 16 billion, and that's what every man, woman, and child in Oregon owe toward the PERS debt. 81% of that debt relates to people that were hired before 1996. These are Tier 1 people, not the current hirees, but those before. How do we deal with that? First of all, we need to understand that it is a huge problem. We're at 22%. 22% of every dollar that we pay in salary goes toward PERS, plus 6% for the IAP, which is the employee portion, plus another 6% for the debt, the pension obligation bonds. So whenever you see a PERS percentage, add 12 on top of it. So that gives you an idea. We're 34 cents on top of every wage dollar. It's absolutely a disaster. Can it be dealt with? It must be dealt with.
Dennis, thank you. And thank you for the long hours you put in and your commitment to excellence and what you do. You've been at it a long time, and I hope you stay there a long time. You're doing a wonderful job. We'll keep you coming back, and as we get a little closer to the election, I want to get your feel for it. Okay?
It's my pleasure.
Thanks for coming in. All right, we'll see you next time on Focus Today.